When I was a freshman in high school, Alyssa was my role model. Alyssa was a senior. She was gorgeous, confident, smart, effortlessly stylish, and always owning the room. Back then, I was too shy to talk to her. Seniors are already pretty intimidating to freshmen, but Alyssa was next level intimidating because she was such a queen. I didn't expect anyone to see me the way I saw Alyssa, but I was pleasantly surprised in my senior year. In my senior year, I started finding these little notes in my locker. I wasn't expecting that at all, but I was really flattered. The first one said, "You were beautiful in the dress on Friday." The handwriting was neat and simple, with a cute little heart at the end. More notes kept coming, always in the fourth period. I got a note every week or two. I know they came during fourth period because I checked my locker before and after every class. They were all really sweet. They said things like, "Your smile lights up the hallway. You shine better than any star. Your homecoming photos are straight out of a magazine cover. So stunning." There are more notes that I don't remember. They weren't romantic or flirty. They looked like things I might have said to Alyssa if we had ever spoken. I thought maybe they were from a shy underclassman girl. I had my suspicions. I didn't tell anyone about these notes. I didn't really want my friends turning this into an investigation and embarrassing whoever was leaving them. Whoever was leaving the messages, I thought they meant well. Then, in the second semester, my schedule changed. My last class of the day was upstairs by my friend's locker. My friend's last class was near my locker. We swapped lockers. I forgot about the notes until my 18th birthday. That morning, my friend handed me a note that she found in my old locker. It said, "Happy birthday, princess." At first, she thought the notes were meant for her, since those compliments could have fit her too. But when she realized the birthday didn't match up, she put two and two together. Come to think of it, I don't think any of the notes ever said my name. I admitted that the notes had been happening all year and explained that I didn't want to make a big deal about it. Then my friends launched their investigation that I had been worried about. All the girls in my friend group became detectives trying to solve this mystery. One friend, who didn't have a fourth period class, stationed herself by the lockers to survey the area. That worked. The notes weren't from a shy freshman or even from a boy. They were from a janitor, an older woman none of us knew. We all recognized her, but I don't think any of us have ever talked to her. She had been leaving these notes for several months, watching me closely enough to comment about my outfits, field hockey games, and even when I posted on Facebook. I saw her at the last field hockey game of the season. She sat quietly in the stands. That was the only time I noticed her watching me, but I have no idea how many places I didn't notice her watching me. None of us brought this up to her. She hadn't done anything wrong, but it felt unsettling in a way that's hard to explain. To start, I am a 17-year-old female, and I am a 12th grader as well. I already have somewhat of a fear of older men, or men in general, due to my own experiences. Another thing is, I have really intense anxiety, so it makes it hard for me to make my discomfort known. I had this math teacher back in 11th grade year who really creeped me out as he would get really close to me. I could smell his breath close. He would touch my shoulder or shake me as a joke, which put me off, but I shut my feelings down as I thought my fear was clouding my judgment. Until, well, this year. This year I had a class that required me to walk past his room to get to my first period. Normally I would just not make eye contact, to not start a conversation. It worked for a while until this one day I was walking down but was stopped by him. He grabbed me by my shoulder and wouldn't let me go until I smiled at him. I just smiled at him, and after he let me go I quickly ran towards first period. Now I avoid that hallway entirely, despite me having to walk up and down the stairs to avoid him. Turns out other female students also found him very creepy after I told my friends what he had done to me. I'm a 19-year-old female. I study in university. During the semester, I noticed that someone had been checking off my own attendance on our class sheet. I didn't know anyone at all, so I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. A week later, a guy sitting in front of me started talking to me, and he seemed friendly. Eventually, he asked me for my contact info, claiming he needed help with classwork, and I gave it to him. After that, he started spamming me messages, stickers, and videos in class. Whenever he noticed I left him on red, he would turn around to check if I was on my phone to respond. He would also track when I was lost online, and would shoot me looks to get my attention. Strangely, he would browse my profile pictures, selfie of me with friends, and stare blankly at them, not typing anything, just frozen. I tell him I needed to focus, but it didn't stop him from spamming away. He purposely angled his screen so that I could see everything he was doing on it, and it's creepy seeing how obsessively he monitors our chat. He's also starting to ask for hugs. A couple days ago was my last class this year with him. I saw the pen ink that he used to check off his name was the same color used for mine on the absence sheet, so I put two and two together, and I'm pretty sure it was him all along. Edit just talked to him and he denies it, but if he's telling the truth, the situation is even weirder. His behavior has always been limited to class hours, so I just want to know if I'm being unnecessarily creeped out. I was physically followed at my previous job, and it made me very wary since then. So I just want to know if he's just socially awkward, or after a while he'll stop. He's gonna be in the same class as me next year too. Edit 2. Just confronted him, and he's more avoidant of me now. Thanks everyone for advice. Last edit. Don't know if there's anyone still reading this post, but there are a few updates since then. He no longer bothers me, but he joined the society club I'm in. Also, he sits behind me in class now. At least I'm not being spammed. This was in 9th grade, and I had walked into class. I had history this period, which definitely wasn't my favorite. My teacher for this class was a bald white and old-looking man with blue eyes. He seemed old and frail, but had a mouth on him. I won't say his name for privacy reasons. He was weirdly really nice to all of the female students, always giving them compliments and calling them a good girl. I didn't think of it as something weird until I heard countless girls sharing things about what he would say to them. He'd act really weird and flirtatious with the young girls and talk to them as if he weren't their teacher. Most of the girls really felt uncomfortable while being in the room with him, and even nervous. He had this aura that was off and made the whole classroom feel eerie. It would always be very awkward listening to him talk with the students. Hearing it would make your skin crawl. "You're such a bad girl," he'd say. "Doesn't that sound wrong? Let me know if I'm reaching." One day he just disappeared and we never saw him again. People flooded their social medias with different theories on why he was gone. Some of them were outrageous, but could be true. Turns out he was a predator and sexually assaulted many girls in that school. More girls came out with stories about it, sharing their experience. I saw this in relief because most of the time, he'd make all these students feel uncomfortable anyways, including me. Good riddance. This was in middle school. My teacher was absent one day, and this gym coach was substituting for him that day. I've seen him around school before, and he substituted for us a few times. I was sitting in my desk talking to one of my friends behind me, pretending to do my work. For some reason, he decided to walk around the room to check if we were all doing the assignment, so I turned to my desk and started writing. He goes one by one by everyone's desk, but slows down once he reaches mine. He hovers over me, just staring down at my work. I got nervous because I didn't want him calling me out. For some reason, I felt his breath on me, heavily, which was grossing me out. He was a frail, old-looking man, so I didn't think much of it. He walked really slowly and seemed harmless, but was very passive-aggressive when he spoke to us. I'd always get this creepy vibe from him, but always thought it was just me. A few months go by and a rumor of him being fired circled around the school. I was curious, so I asked around to know what the tea was. Apparently, the same teacher that would sub for my class was fired. He was caught trying to touch the girls during practice and throughout the gym periods, which was soon reported by a student. He even got caught hiding behind the crack of the door, watching the girls change in the locker room. He just watched them. And he finally got caught while doing this, and was fired and kicked out of the school. The news made it everywhere, even on the nightly news. It spread like wildfire. Thinking back on it now, it gives me chills to think that he'd watch girls change, and thank goodness he was caught. You never know people's intentions. I'm a 27-year-old female. I graduated from high school about 10 years ago. In my freshman year of high school, I was well known and had lots of friends. I was very friendly, and every time I saw someone alone, I would greet them and offer them my friendship. Sometime during that year in my math class, we had a new guy. We'll call him Jose. Jose recently moved to the US from Mexico. He hardly knew any English. Me being Hispanic, I was able to speak to him in Spanish and make him feel welcomed. Jose had no friends and always sat by himself. In math class, I started helping Jose a lot. He sat behind me and would always play with my hair. Not touching my head, but just my hair, so I could hardly feel it. I sort of felt like he had a crush on me, and he was not bad looking, so I didn't look at it as a big deal. For the first 2 or 3 months, he played with my hair. It became a norm. He said he really liked my hair. Towards the end of those months, he said he wanted to play a game and asked me to write the things I loved most in my life. He would do the same, and we would both share our papers. Of course, I wrote down family, God, friends, and a whole bunch of other things. When I gave him back the list, he wanted specific names and said that he would do the same. I ended up writing my friends' and family's names. One day we were hanging out in class and Jose said, "Can I show you something? But you can't tell anyone or else you're gonna have to pay for it." I was confused. I thought maybe he was gonna ask me out. Jose pulled out a Ziploc bag and I couldn't really tell what was in the bag. It wasn't until he placed it on the table that I noticed that it was a Ziploc bag full of my hair. Jose pulled up his sleeve and showed me his arm. He had about 10 healed knife scars, lines made with the blade of a knife that went down his arm. There was a fresh knife wound, and he grabbed my hairs and placed it on top of the freshly opened wound and said, "You are mine now. I know who you love, what you love. If you don't do as I say, you will pay for everything. These are all of the scars, and these are all of the souls I own. Anything and everything that happens from now on, think of me." My heart sank. He started smirking. I ran out of class crying and ran to the office. Everyone was so confused. I asked to speak to my counselor immediately. I explained what happened. Jose was pulled out of class, taken to the principal's office, and expelled that day. I feared for my life. They found all these notes of other people in his backpack. Mine was there. They saw all the scars and found all my hair. I never heard of Jose again. I've had some pretty fucked up shit happen in my life after that. I've always thought of Jose. I haven't talked about this in years. I'm afraid that if I mention this, he will hear me and more bad is to follow. I've got so close with God, closer than ever. Until this day, I don't know if Jose was just messing with me, but I will tell you that after this encounter, I am no longer the super friendly and open-hearted person I once was. This happened 6 or 7 years ago now. I played soccer for 1 year in community college after high school. I knew this guy because he worked for the athletics department. He was another student. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I had a 1 hour gap between classes. This guy noticed me in the library, asked what I was doing there, and I told him I had an hour-long gap, and he started coming regularly to hang out. I didn't mind because he seemed like a normal guy. He wasn't waiting for anything, but he just wanted to hang out. He brought me little gifts a few times, like chocolate and stuff. He was being a little too sweet for someone I barely knew. I just didn't think about the red flags. With the gifts, I remember he always downplayed it. He'd be like, "They had an extra Kit Kat bar today in the office. Do you want some?" He never said that he purposely bought the Kit Kat for me. I know a lot more about boys now than I knew back then. I think he knew that buying me gifts would be too much, but he still wanted to do it without doing it. The soccer season for us ended before Thanksgiving. The only teams that kept playing after that were going to the playoffs, not us. After Thanksgiving, we had finals. In that brief period after soccer season and before Thanksgiving, he asked me about my classes for the second semester. To be honest, I hadn't been super organized with course registration, and honestly, I didn't know. Also, the counselors were completely useless. I didn't tell him that, but I remember saying I didn't want to have another gap hour like this because it wasted so much time. I don't think he was happy to hear that. He also asked if I would play another season, and I said no to that. I needed to manage my time better, and playing soccer every day was not helping. I think my mistake was that I just said too much and unfiltered. I used to do that a lot back then, saying too much without thinking about how it can affect other people's feelings. That was on the last Thursday before Thanksgiving, so no more 1 hour gaps to hang out anymore. We had Thanksgiving break, we took finals, and we had winter break. Everything was great. Winter break was when all the real problems started. In the mornings, this guy would literally show up outside my house while sitting in his car. The first time I didn't believe it was actually him. The second time I checked, and it was. By then, it was really clear that we both knew what was going on. He was stalking me, and that wasn't all. I posted on my Instagram stories sometimes about places where I was. This guy literally showed up there several times, like girly stores at the mall where he had no business being. He did lots of things like that. He also started pointing his phone at me like he was taking pictures. That was even weirder. I basically stopped using social media after this. After winter break, this continued. When my parents were at work, this guy came during afternoons too. I called the cops a few times. They went and tried to talk to him, but he basically told them that he wasn't going to talk, and that was that. I think the cops wanted to help, but they could never do anything about it because he was careful not to break the law. Like, he didn't trespass, he didn't make threats, he didn't show weapons. I have no idea what he's doing now. My guess is that he gave up. Maybe his little obsession kind of became old, and he found other things to pay more attention to. At least I hope so. But if he still comes by, I have no idea. I think the most challenging thing is that I couldn't tell my parents, since I know they would completely freak out. This is my story about being stalked. Dealing with this has been difficult, and throughout the ordeal, I felt out of control. So I'm sharing this to gain control over my own story. This story is long as it spanned over 2 years. Several years ago, I moved abroad to begin a 2-year study course. When I arrived at my apartment, I met 3 of my roommates. Sam was funny and sarcastic, while Bella and Poppy were both nice, sorority-type girls. We decided to go out for dinner, and I offered to invite the 4th roommate in room 1C next to mine. Sam warned me not to invite her, saying she was odd. I was worried because I didn't want to live with a bunch of catty girls. How were they fighting in less than 1 day? I smiled and told Sam that she just made a bad first impression, and I would invite her to get to know her better. Sam grumbled as I left the kitchen, approaching the door next to mine. I knocked on the door, and the door opened. A short, petite girl with long brown hair and a childlike face stuck her head out. I introduced myself and invited her for dinner. The girl's face lifted at my invitation, and she nodded in agreement. Our excitement for the new school year kept us lively as we arrived at the restaurant. I decided to befriend the girl in room 1C since we were sharing a bathroom. I learned that her name was Nellie. We were the same age, from the same state, and in the same program. I ordered a Jack and Coke as Nellie leaned in and asked me if I actually drank alcohol. I nodded, thinking her question was odd. We were both in our 20s. Of course I drank alcohol. Nellie focused her attention on me while we ate. As I got to know Nellie, I kind of felt bad for her. She was born in Sri Lanka, but immigrated as a kid, and since she had an accent and lisp, I assumed that she was bullied. Nellie was different from me. She was shy and claimed to not have hobbies or friends, but I figured that since we were in the same program, I could befriend her. I asked if she wanted to sit with me in class, and she happily agreed. I felt content knowing that I was befriending her, like I was doing a good deed. My first 2 weeks abroad went smoothly. I got used to my surroundings, made friends, and got along with my roommates. Sam, Bella, Poppy, and I would often cook and eat dinner together while we chatted about our days. Nellie and I got along, but she was socially awkward. I made it my goal to befriend her, which was easy because we sat together in lecture every day. We even opened our bedroom doors in unison. I would open my door, then Nellie would open hers and ask me where I was going. One night, I left my room to go grocery shopping when Nellie's door opened and asked if she could join me. I agreed, and she hurriedly put on her sandals and her neon pink coat. I walked through the aisle. Nellie silently followed closely behind me. Eventually, I found everything I needed, but Nellie said that she wasn't buying anything. After I paid for everything and began to exit the store, the alarms went off. I stopped to show the security guard my receipt, and he looked at my bags, confirming I hadn't stolen anything. I didn't think much of the incident, but when I stood in the front of the store with Nellie for the 4th time as my bags got searched by security, a thought crept into my mind. The alarms never rang when I was alone or with friends. They only rang when I was with Nellie. I shook my head. Nellie couldn't be stealing. I was with her the whole time. She was a perfectly nice, normal girl, and I was rude to think the contrary. The harmony in the apartments only lasted 2 weeks. One morning, I shuffled into the bathroom and saw the toilet was completely full with 2 or 3 rolls of dry, unraveled toilet paper sprawled onto the floor. However, what concerned me most was the huge wad of hair that sat directly on top of the toilet paper. I knew then that it was Nellie who had done this. She was the only other person with a bathroom key, and her hair color was a match. I tried to think of any reason why she would do this. Maybe she clogged the toilet, then stuffed it with toilet paper to hide her business, but that didn't explain the wad of hair. I couldn't harp on the issue though, so I made a maintenance request to have someone unclog the toilet, and when I came home from class, the toilet was unclogged. I studied for 2 hours before going back into the bathroom. I was annoyed when I found the toilet clogged again, toilet paper, hair, and all. This obviously wasn't a mistake anymore, and now we were out of toilet paper. I knew I had to say something, but I didn't want to directly confront Nellie about this awkward topic, so I sent a passive, non-aggressive text. Hey, if something goes wrong with the toilet, can you make a maintenance request right away, please? I sent the message, carefully, not making it accusatory. I didn't want there to be tension with Nellie, especially since she still sat with me in class. Nellie never acknowledged the situation. She still opened the door with mine, hung out with me, and sat with me in class. For the next 2 months, I just dealt with the constant toilet paper and torn out hair. I tried sending texts, but it didn't help. Nellie would clog the toilet. I'd make a maintenance request. The staff member would clean Nellie's mess. Then she would do it again. Eventually, after 12 clogged toilets, I was so annoyed that I decided to confront Nellie. Nellie, I know that you're clogging the toilet, and you need to stop. If you do it again, I'm going to report you. I pressed send and walked into class. I decided that I wouldn't sit with Nellie anymore. I had different friends to sit with who didn't clog my toilet. As I sat down with Reagan and Charlotte, I felt bad seeing Nellie sit alone across the lecture hall. I promised myself that I would still be friends with her and that everything would be fine. I was happy that the holiday break was soon, and Nellie never addressed me about not sitting with her. The message had worked. Nellie stopped clogging the toilet, and we were still friends. But I come home one day in early December and my nose scrunched in disgust. There was a sticky, sweet, rotten yogurt-like smell coming from Nellie's room. I didn't want to confront Nellie so soon after messaging her about the toilet, so for weeks I avoided the problem. I didn't address the issue until 2 weeks after, when all our food started to rot almost immediately after buying it. Bella, Sam, Poppy were complaining about how maintenance hadn't found the source of what was causing that food to rot. When I brought up the horrible smell and the accompanied fly infestation, the girls went to go smell the hallway outside of Nellie's room and returned 2 minutes later coughing and gagging. We posited about what was causing the smell when Sam brought up seeing Nellie at 2 a.m. skipping through the woods. Sam was heading back from a club and Nellie was skipping around like a possessed doll, according to Sam. After we spoke, Nellie entered the kitchen and everyone felt quiet. Sam bluntly asked Nellie what the smell in her room was, and Nellie just silently shrugged her shoulders. Annoyed by this, Sam stood up, grabbed Nellie's arm, and guided her into the hallway as the rest of us followed, covering our noses with our sleeve. Nellie claimed not to smell anything, but her eyes were darting rapidly between the 3 of us. Sam made a sarcastic comment towards Nellie as we returned to the kitchen without Nellie. Sam was a bit harsh, and a part of me felt bad for Nellie. At least Christmas would be relaxing. I spent 2 weeks at a friend's house with her family for Christmas. They were all welcoming, so I didn't miss home too much. My friend knew about Nellie, so she bought me some scented candles for Christmas. When I returned to the apartment, I felt rested and equipped to face the new year. My January exams were online and pretty easy, so I was surprised when Nellie texted me asking if I would cheat with her on the final exam. I politely declined, and she asked if I would go to lunch with her the next day. I had no plans, so I accepted her invitation. I spent a lot of time with her, but she never actually spoke much, so despite everything, I wanted to get to know her better. Once we were at the restaurant, I racked my brain for things I could talk to Nellie about. Attempting to break the awkward silence, I asked her what her favorite show was. She told me that she loves to watch Sophia the First. I was confused. Sophia the First is a Disney toddler show that came out when we were teens. Why would she be watching a show for toddlers in her 20s? I didn't know how to expand on what she said, so I changed the subject and asked her what her favorite hobby was. Nellie giggled and said, "I do this a lot actually. I listen to you through the walls. They're so thin, I barely put my ear against it." I hear you talk to your parents every day." I tried not to look horrified as I sat there confused and a little scared. Nellie then started laughing. "You're like a mother, but I'm an aunt and we're sisters together." I smiled awkwardly and nodded. I had no clue how to respond. In a desperate attempt to change topics, I asked her about her childhood in Sri Lanka. Nellie slammed her fist on the table, sending my rice flying off my plate. Nellie yelled that she was not from Sri Lanka, and I apologized, even though she definitely had told me that she was from there. Nellie began to laugh again. "I have plans for us tonight. We'll go to a graveyard and walk around. You'll be scared, but I'll have fun with you." Nellie's eyes were opened incredibly wide, and her mouth seemed to open more than usual. She was scaring me, and I didn't want to be rude, so I said I'll invite our other roommates too. At that, Nellie let go of her fork and quickly moved her hand onto mine. She insisted that we go alone. I pulled my hand back, attempting to hide the grimace, and stuttered out a disingenuous, "Maybe." Nellie leaned back slowly, rolling her head from one side to the other, and mumbled about how fun it will be. The rest of her lunch was silent. When we got back to the apartment, I said goodbye to her and went into my room. I didn't call my parents that night. I went to bed early, hoping to quell my anxiety and get some much needed rest. The next day I did laundry, went shopping, and by 2, I was meal prepping for the week. I jumped when I heard Nellie ask me if I wanted to go to the movies with her. I hadn't heard her come into the kitchen, but there she stood, her head down and her eyes turned up staring at me. I declined her request, but she repeated her question. I politely declined once again, trying to offset the bizarre vibe. Nellie didn't respond and retreated back to her room, then left for the movies. An hour later, I went to the bathroom, and when I opened the door, I gagged immediately. The smell was bad, but the sight was worse. The walls, floor, door, sink, and toilet were covered with smeared poop and blood. I could see distinct handprints. I closed the door, not trying to puke. I was shocked that Nellie had done this, but my shock turned into anger as I messaged Nellie. "What you did is weird and disgusting. You need to clean it. I'm going to report you." I pressed send. I no longer cared about being friends with Nellie. I felt gross, so I went to our shower room next to the bathroom, but Nellie ruined that too. There was toilet paper shoved into the shower drain, and wads of toilet paper crusted onto the walls. I was livid at this point, but I had to wait until Monday to report her. So I laid down to take a nap. 2 hours later, I was awoken with Nellie slamming the front door. I heard footsteps until her feet were visibly on the crack under my door. I expected a knock, but she didn't. Instead, Nellie began to continuously chirp like a bird. She briefly paused, then began twisting my doorknob in unison with her chirps. I stood there unnerved as Nellie did this for 5 minutes. Then Nellie began to rapidly knock on the door and call my cell phone. 7 times she called, hung up, then called again while still rapidly knocking. Nellie then began to ram her body against my door over and over again. The shock of it all made me stumble back onto my bed. Then, as suddenly as it started, Nellie stopped. Her feet still visible under my door. My phone buzzed, and I slowly unlocked it, staring down in horror at Nellie's text. The cockroach screamed, "Why do this to me? Because you couldn't be positive in a negative situation?" the doctor said. The doctor pulls off the cockroach's legs, and it cries. The doctor has no choice. The cockroach must be killed, and its family taken away. You are the funny cockroach. I was terrified as Nellie began to knock and chirp. I was scared to call the cops because I was on a visa, and if they didn't believe me, I could be deported for making false reports. I texted Poppy and Bella, who had heard everything. Nellie stood there for an hour straight, occasionally pushing her fingers through the crack under my door. When Bella's boyfriend arrived, his presence scared Nellie away. We met up and talked about what happened before going to bed. That night, I barely slept. I was too scared. I woke up the next day anxious from the previous night's events. I tried to convince myself that it wasn't that bad. However, as I peeked into the bathroom, its condition suggested otherwise. Charlotte and Reagan were skipping class, so I sat alone. I saw Nellie enter the room, bypass her regular seat, weave through the aisles, and inspect each row as she passed. I sank in my chair as she got closer, horrified by the realization that she was searching for me. With last night's memories fresh in my mind, I froze in fear when Nellie found me and robotically bent down to meet my eye line as she sat next to me with her mouth twisted in a sinister smile. I did nothing as she sat next to me, too scared to move and worried about any teeny shift may cause her to attack. When the professor dismissed us, I shot up, frantically packing my things up. Nellie asked where I was going, and I lied to her, saying I was going to a cafe. I didn't want her to know where I was, so I went home for lunch, and as I stood in the kitchen, the door opened. "You weren't at the cafe." Nellie's eyes darted up at me. She was looking at the knife on the table. I apologized and told Nellie that my plans had changed. My heart raced as I asked her if she liked the lecture. She didn't respond. She just stared with her head tilted and mouth agape. I asked her again, but she still didn't answer. I faced her, afraid that she would use the knife on me. She glared so intently that her veins were protruding. She stood there for 10 minutes before leaving. Later on, I walked to the library and froze when I saw Nellie's pink jacket behind me. I turned to see Nellie staring at me with vacant eyes. She followed me into the library, up to the 3rd floor, and sat directly behind me. With her threat still fresh in my mind, I moved to a different spot, but she followed me. I tried again, but she still followed. I was scared to be isolated in the library with her, so I decided to leave. I quickly weaved through the bookshelves, desperately trying to reach the lobby, but Nellie matched my pace. I was nearing a heart attack when I ran into my guardian angel, Sam. "Nellie's following me," I blurted out. Sam looked at Nellie, who had stopped 5 feet behind me. She nonchalantly told Nellie to fuck off. I was surprised when Nellie did just that. After Sam and I spoke for a bit, my phone buzzed. It was Nellie, inviting me to the graveyard that night. Sam told me that I'd be smart to move out, and she was right. I needed to report Nellie and move out. It wasn't safe for me to live in that apartment anymore. I needed to get away. I went to Reagan's apartment, as she was the closest person I had to family while I was abroad. She gave me refuge while listening to me retell the last 48 miserable hours of my life. She reassured me that I could stay with her, and as I held back tears, my phone buzzed. Sam texted me that she needed help and to go to the apartment ASAP. I was hesitant to go back there, but I just couldn't abandon Sam, so I grabbed my stuff and told Reagan I would be back soon. I walked to my apartment and stared up at it, feeling a lot like a priest in the Exorcist movie. When I got to my door, I was immediately greeted by my 3 roommates' distraught faces. I followed them into the apartment, and my eyes were wide as Sam opened the kitchen door to reveal a truly demonic sight. Huge amounts of congealed red and orange liquid pooled across the floor, leading beneath a table where a small bird lay dead, with its wings outstretched and its head missing. I felt sick. The windows don't open, so it didn't get here by itself. Nellie either found the bird and brought it into the kitchen, or she killed it and decapitated a living bird and then put it in the kitchen. I don't like either of those 2 options. I assured my roommates that I would report Nellie that night, and that's exactly what I did. I spoke to the school safety board, and things moved fast. I discovered that Nellie had lied about her name and age. Officials in hazmat suits came to clean the kitchen and Nellie's room. The board had me send them photos of myself daily in case Nellie killed me and they had to identify me. I quickly moved out, and since Nellie avoided the other girls, they decided to stay. I declined to submit Nellie for expulsion because I felt bad for her. and thought that moving away would stop her obsession with me. I was completely misguided. I was happy that my new roommates were normal, and no Nelly incidents happened for 2 weeks. I did have a large uptick in random daily Facebook and Instagram followers from blank profile users. I knew who was behind this, but I was avoiding any Nelly related thoughts. I was having night terrors, and the more I thought about her, the worse they got. I blocked another user as I sat down with Reagan and Charlotte in an almost empty lecture hall. Charlotte nudged me as Nellie entered the room, bypassing her usual seat. I felt myself freeze up as she entered in her row and began walking towards me, staring at me with her dead eyes. "Don't fucking sit next to me," I said, shocked by my bravery. Nellie responded by sitting 10 seats down from me, not breaking eye contact, and I considered that a win. After class, I went home and then walked to the store. I forgot to grab a cart, so I quickly turned around to fetch one and ran into someone standing directly behind me. It was Nellie. Did she follow me from my apartment? Does she know where I live? My heart stopped as I backed into another aisle, and Nellie followed. I walked to another aisle, but Nellie followed me, matching my pace until I went into another aisle, and she began to run. I ran away terrified, and Nellie only stopped when I got to the security desk. Security offered to call the police, but I declined and gave them my email to send me the footage of Nellie chasing me. I had to report Nellie, but since I still had class that day, I decided to report her the next day. 2 hours later, as I waited for Reagan to walk me to my class, I caught Nellie staring at me from across the street, but she didn't approach me and walked with the crowd towards campus. Minutes later, Reagan found me and we headed to class together. I walked beside Reagan, passing the building and alleyways, until a rock caught in my shoe and I bent over to fix it. Reagan switched to the right side of me to look at a billboard, and when I removed the rock, we began walking again. I turned my head to speak when Natalie jumped out of the alleyway onto Reagan. Her hands were outstretched and clasped around Reagan's neck. Words can't explain how terrified I was. Nellie let go immediately, and Reagan grabbed my arm, walking forward. Nellie began walking shoulder to shoulder with me, her head turned sideways in an unnatural angle. The look in her eyes were not human. Reagan told me to run, and we bolted across the street. Natalie paused, but walked away, traffic stopping her from crossing. We stopped, and Reagan leaned against the fence as I bent over, covered my mouth, trying not to vomit. After a while, we continued our walk to class in silence. We made it to the lobby and headed down the staircase, but Nellie stood at the bottom of it. "I won't let her walk behind me," I said, voice shaking. Reagan nodded, and we followed a large crowd after Nellie walked upstairs, only to find her holding the door open for everyone. Nellie stared at me through the crowd until everyone but Reagan and I had passed through. "It's okay, you can go first," Reagan said while smiling at Nellie. I was shocked at how composed she was, and even more shocked that Nellie listened. We sat down in class and Nellie tried to sit behind me, but someone was saving the seat for his friend, so Nellie left. I didn't pay attention to the lecture. I sat there shocked and terrified while Reagan hunched low in her seat, rubbing her neck. I felt horrible for bringing Reagan into this Nellie crap. I knew then Nellie needed to be expelled no matter what. The next day, I reported Nellie to the Student Safety Board, and they raised the issue to the Disciplinary Board. I submitted a lengthy report detailing everything Nellie had done. I included Reagan, Bella, Poppy, and Sam as witnesses, and gave photographic evidence of the threats, the calls, the smeared poop and blood, clogged shower and toilets, and the stalking. The next week, I met with the disciplinary board to go over their conclusions. They informed me that they had reviewed my report, met with Nellie to give her a copy of my report, discussed my accusations, and had come to a conclusion. They acknowledged that everything I reported was factual, but they didn't think that Nellie had any malicious intent. so they would grant a no contact order, but Nellie would not be expelled. I was completely perplexed by their conclusion and asked them what Nellie had to say about this, but they refused to tell me anything. I was at a loss for words. I couldn't believe that Nellie was given my full report, knew everything that I said, and knew the witnesses' names. The school put us all in danger. Yet, they wouldn't allow me to know if Nellie had even denied her actions. I was devastated. I felt my mind go numb. I knew at that moment that they didn't care, that they were going to prioritize a predator. So with no other options, I agreed to the no contact order. The worker tried to get me to sign a non-disclosure agreement so I wouldn't speak about what Nellie had done to me or how the school dealt with my case, but I refused to sign it. The next day I received email confirmation that Nellie had agreed to the no contact order, but I knew that meant nothing. Nellie wouldn't get help and she would never stop stalking me. My sophomore year was plagued with the relentless pattern of Nellie stalking me from place to place, sitting next to me in class, standing next to me in hallways, and staring at me daily. Her actions were so unnerving and obvious that multiple strangers warned me about her. I reported these incidents every time they occurred, and the school always responded by stating that they would remind Nellie of the no contact order. They never took any further steps to help me. In sophomore year, Nellie found other roommates, and in them, next victims. She was evicted from an off-campus apartment, and her new roommates, who once sat with her, began to sit far away from her. They looked terrified. They looked like me. Having incidents happen weekly and having to see Nellie daily made it impossible to move on. I was always in flight or freeze mode, terrified by what Nellie had done and what she still might do to me. I became a sunken in, miserable and defeated version of myself. I wanted revenge, a natural result of the boiling rage I felt, now at a constant simmer after Nellie was coddled by the university that failed to shell out even a minor consequence for the terror she imposed on me. I wanted her to suffer in the same way that she made me suffer. I knew if I had just grown a pair in those early months, I could have saved myself and others from suffering. Nellie was likely stalking me from the moment I met her. I just hadn't realized it, and it weighs heavily on me to know that I played a large part in my own suffering. No matter what I write, I can't begin to recreate the evil that radiated off of Nellie. I have daily night terrors. I don't go into new situations. I don't speak to new people, and I don't make friends. I'm not nice to strangers because I don't want something like this to happen again. Revenge came on graduation day when Nellie's name didn't appear on the book of graduates. She had failed second year, but despite everything, I couldn't help but think that I was a bad person for being content with her failing. Maybe I was just happy that I could finally move on.